was sentenced to death over the weekend at a high-profile murder trial in Idaho. A jury found him guilty in the 2019 murders of his ex-wife, Tammy Daybell, and his then-girlfriend, Lori Vallow's two youngest children, 7-year-old Joshua Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Vallow, who is now married to Daybell, is serving 3 life terms in prison.
She called herself a goddess. He thought he could judge spirits. Together they believed their own children had been taken by demons. 2 kids, 2 graves, no remorse. This is the true story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, and the children who trusted them. In the soft morning glow of suburban Arizona, Lori Vallow seemed like a woman who had it all. She was strikingly beautiful, with perfectly styled blonde hair, a megawatt smile, and the poise of someone used to being looked at. She was a mother, a former pageant contestant, and a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. At first glance, she was just another woman in leggings, doing the school run. Polite, upbeat, God-fearing, but behind that smile was a storm no one could see coming. She believed she had been chosen for something greater. She believed she could hear God, and she believed some people, even those closest to her, had become zombies. Lori was married to Charles Vallow, her 4th husband. He was patient, successful, and generous. He even adopted her youngest son, Joshua J.J. Vallow, who was autistic but joyful, affectionate, and wildly energetic. JJ had been born to Lori's relatives, but was lovingly raised as her own. Lori's teenage daughter from a previous marriage, Tylee Ryan, was sarcastic, smart, fiercely protective of JJ, and weary of Lori's growing eccentricities. The Vallows moved often. Texas, Arizona, Hawaii. They lived in a world of sunny selfies and blended family chaos. But by 2018, Charles began to notice changes in Lori that he couldn't explain. She wasn't just religious anymore. She was fanatical. She talked about portals, spirits, angels. She stopped sleeping. She claimed to be a goddess sent to prepare the world for the second coming. And then she said Charles was already dead. His body, she whispered, had been taken over by a dark spirit named Ned Schneider. He laughed at first. Then he got scared. Around the same time, Chad Daybell was quietly writing his way into her world, a soft-spoken man from Rexburg, Idaho. Chad was a former cemetery sexton, a grave digger turned apocalyptic novelist. He self-published Doomsday, books inspired by LDS theology, mixed with his own twisted visions, dark portals, spiritual battles, and a coming catastrophe that only the faithful would survive. He believed he could see beyond the veil. He claimed he had lived multiple past lives. He kept a private, light, dark scale, rating people's souls, even children, from 0 to 100, and when Lori discovered his books, she fell in love, not just with the message, but with the messenger. Their first meeting was electric. She told friends Chad recognized her eternal mission immediately, that they'd been married in previous lifetimes, that their current spouses were obstacles, that the world was ending, and only they could save the chosen. It wasn't. Long before they began calling themselves gatherers of the 144,000, referencing a biblical prophecy. They believed the world would end in July 2020, and anyone who stood in their way was a threat to be removed, even if it was their children. In January 2019, Charles filed for divorce. He begged police to intervene. He said Lori threatened to kill him. He said she believed she was a god. He told them she vanished with the kids and emptied his bank account, but every time officers were called, she smiled. She said he was exaggerating. And more often than not, they believed her. Then one afternoon, Charles was shot dead in Lori's home. Her brother, Alex Cox, claimed self-defense. He said Charles came at him with a bat during an argument. Lori, eerily calm, made TikTok jokes. Hours later, She took JJ to Burger King. She told the kids everything was fine. The police believed her. There was no arrest, but someone else wasn't buying it. Tylee Ryan. She told friends she was scared. She started staying quiet. Then she told one cousin, "Something's wrong. I don't know what, but something's really wrong." She wouldn't have long to find out. Tylee Ryan was last seen on September 8, 2019, standing on the edge of a volcanic crater in Yellowstone National Park. It was a chilly Sunday morning. Photos taken that day show her smiling stiffly beside Lori, Alex Cox, and little JJ. She's wearing a hoodie and leggings. She looks tired, distant, like she doesn't want to be there. It would be the last image ever taken of her alive. Just 2 weeks earlier, Lori Vallow had packed up her life in Arizona, loaded her children into a U-Haul, and relocated to Rexburg, Idaho, just minutes away from Chad Daybell's house. It was sudden, it was secretive, and it was strategic, because in Rexburg, no one knew them. Lori could hide in plain sight, just another blonde mom with 2 kids and a townhouse rental. Except by September 24th, JJ was gone too. It began with silence. Lori stopped calling relatives. She stopped posting on social media. She told neighbors JJ had gone to stay with friends. She said Tylee was off at college, but neither child was ever seen again. JJ's school grew suspicious first. He was enrolled in a special needs program. He loved it. He thrived on structure, but suddenly he was pulled out. No explanation, no follow-up. Then Kay Woodcock, Charles Vallow's sister and JJ's biological grandmother, tried to call Lori. No answer. She texted. No reply. Kay knew something was wrong. JJ never missed her FaceTime calls, so she reported JJ missing. And that's when the dam broke. When Rexburg police visited Lori's home in late November 2019, she greeted them with a smile, calm, polished, confident. They asked, "Where's JJ?" She said he was in Arizona with a family friend. They called the friend. She hadn't seen JJ in months. When police returned the next day, Lori was gone. She had fled, again, this time to Kauai, Hawaii, with Chad Daybell. They'd left behind clothes, electronics, baby photos. They'd taken nothing but suitcases and each other, and while the nation watched in horror, authorities realized something unthinkable. No one had seen Tylee Ryan or JJ Vallow in over 2 months. The FBI got involved. They subpoenaed phone records, email accounts, Amazon purchases. They discovered that on the very day after Tylee disappeared, Chad Daybell had texted his wife, Tammy Daybell, saying he'd burned a raccoon in the backyard. Tammy didn't question it, but 2 weeks later, she was dead. Tammy Daybell had been a school librarian, quiet, loving, adored by students. She died suddenly on October 19, 2019, in her sleep. Chad told authorities she'd coughed, then passed. He declined an autopsy. They ruled it natural causes, and just 17 days later, Chad married Lori Vallow on a beach in Hawaii. They wore white. They smiled for photos. They danced barefoot in the surf. 2 dead spouses, 2 missing children. One perfect honeymoon. The world began to take notice. By January 2020, the case had gone viral. A mother, a self-proclaimed prophet, a trail of corpses, and 2 missing kids. Protesters flew to Kauai and confronted Lori on the beach. She smirked at them. She refused to answer any questions. The FBI issued a court order. Produce your children within 5 days or face arrest. Lori did nothing. She was arrested on February 20th, 2020. Chad stood nearby, arms crossed, expression blank. She was charged with desertion, obstruction, and contempt of court. Held on $5 million bail, but the bigger question remained, where were Tylee and JJ? It was a warm June morning in Rexburg, Idaho, when the digging began. The FBI, Idaho State Police, and local investigators had obtained a search warrant for Chad Daybell's property. A modest beige home nestled beside a quiet patch of farmland. From the road, it looked ordinary, peaceful, the kind of place where kids ride bikes and neighbors wave hello. But investigators weren't there for pleasantries. They had a map. They had cadaver dogs. They had spent months chasing digital breadcrumbs. Text messages, GPS data, phone pings, and everything pointed to one terrifying conclusion. The children never left Rexburg. The agents moved quickly. They focused on a patch of backyard behind a red outbuilding, just steps from the fire pit Chad had once told friends he used for spiritual and cleansing. The ground was disturbed, looser than the rest. Flies hovered in the sun. The scent of death seeped through the soil, and then they found hair, charred bones, a melted green bucket. The smell was overwhelming. One agent retched behind a bush, and deeper still, beneath a layer of plywood and plastic, they uncovered the blackened remains of a child, wrapped in duct tape and trash bags. J.J. Vallow. He was buried in his red pajamas. His arms were bound to his sides. His mouth was duct-taped shut. There was a white plastic bag wrapped tightly around his head. Nearby, a separate pit held burned, dismembered remains. Teeth, a partial jawbone. Bone fragments scorched beyond recognition. They used dental records to confirm it. Tylee Ryan. She had been cut apart, burned and buried in pieces, her remains so damaged the coroner could barely say what killed her. Chad Daybell watched from his car. He sat parked across the street as investigators unearthed the graves. When they moved in to arrest him, he tried to drive away, but it was too late. He was charged with 2 felony counts of destruction and concealment of evidence. When police pulled him from the car, his face was pale, his mouth pressed tight. No tears, no explanation. He was handcuffed under a blue Idaho sky, and the news spread like fire. The world mourned. Twitter exploded. Vigils were held. Teddy bears were placed on fences. Strangers wept for children they'd never met. And Lori. Vallow? She didn't cry, she didn't blink. When jail officials told her that her children's remains had been found, she shrugged and said only, "That's unfortunate." The courtrooms were packed. Reporters lined the sidewalk before sunrise. Spectators arrived with notepads, tissues, and fury. Everyone wanted to see the woman who called herself a goddess, who danced on Hawaiian beaches while her children lay buried in a stranger's backyard. Lori Vallow arrived in court, wearing red lipstick, freshly curled hair, and a vacant stare. She smiled at times, whispered to her attorneys, tilted her head like a pageant contestant. It was surreal. She had been declared mentally incompetent twice, delayed her trial for nearly a year. But now she stood facing murder charges, the full weight of the horror finally crashing down. Prosecutors didn't hold back. They called it a story of apocalypse and annihilation. They laid out the twisted theology that justified murder. Lori believed people could be possessed by zombies, that once someone was dark enough, their body could be freed through death, that she and Chad kept spiritual rating charts for friends, family, and even the kids. Tylee was dark. JJ was dark. Tammy Daybell? Also dark. One text from Chad read, "Tammy is in limbo. Her spirit left. I felt her exit. A darker entity has taken her place." Weeks later, she was dead. They played wiretapped calls, showed journal entries, and introduced text messages that read like a fictional cult thriller. "We need to do a binding prayer. JJ is acting out again. He's not himself. Tylee is being very resistant to light. Her spirit may have left." Kay and Larry, Woodcock, JJ's grandparents, sat in the front row every day. They wept through testimonies. They gripped each other's hands during photos. They brought a stuffed dinosaur, JJ's favorite, and placed it on the bench beside them. Colby Ryan, Lori's surviving son, also testified. His voice broke as he said, "I used to love her so much, but I don't know who she is anymore." Defense had little ground to stand on. They argued Lori was manipulated by Chad, that she was delusional, not malicious, that she truly believed her children's spirits were somewhere better. But the evidence was overwhelming, cold, digital, indisputable. JJ's iPad stopped moving after September 23rd. Laurie logged into his school app 3 days later, from Chad's house. Amazon purchases included duct tape, plastic bags, shovels, and, perhaps most haunting, a text Laurie sent after the murders, joking about angels singing and being so free now. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury returned in under 7 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. First-degree murder of J.J. Vallow conspiracy. To murder Tammy Daybell grand theft. For stealing Social Security checks after the children's deaths, Laurie Vallow was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She showed no emotion, no remorse. She simply blinked, then turned to leave. Chad Daybell's trial is next. He faces the death penalty. His defense will likely lean on Laurie's insanity, his own spiritual delusions, and a hope that the jury can't comprehend just how far a belief can go when untethered from reality. But to those who knew Tylee and JJ, none of it matters now. Because no doctrine, no prophecy, no sacred scroll could ever justify what was done to them. The Idaho wind blew softly through the cemetery, where 2 small gravestones now rest side by side, one etched with a dinosaur, the other with a small heart. Joshua J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, laid to rest after 9 months in the earth, not in coffins, not whole, but finally seen. It wasn't supposed to end this way. JJ was supposed to keep dancing in the rain, running laps around his school hallway, asking for M&Ms after dinner, Grandma. Tylee was supposed to graduate, high school, travel, find her voice again after years of being told to hush, of being gaslit by the woman who gave her life. Instead, she became its cost. Kay and Larry Woodcock have become advocates, loud ones. They speak at conferences, support other grieving families. They wear shirts with JJ's face and tell anyone who will listen, the world didn't forget him, and we won't let it. Colby Ryan, the only surviving child of Laurie Vallow, released a heartbreaking podcast episode titled The Silence Between Us. In it, he says, "She stopped being my mom the moment she let them die. I believe she chose Chad over us, over everything." Laurie remains incarcerated, forever silenced behind the walls of a maximum security prison. She writes letters to God, to Chad, to herself. She claims the world doesn't understand her mission, that her children are safe now, that everything is still unfolding according to prophecy. It's unclear if she'll ever face the full reality. Chad Daybell awaits trial, his sunken face no longer beaming with false prophecy. Prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty. His followers, once loyal readers of his doomsday fiction, have all but vanished. Even in the darkest faiths, the light can go out. What remains is a blueprint of how belief without boundaries can turn holy words into weapons, of how apocalyptic obsession, unchecked ego, and the seduction of special purpose can destroy everything pure. But what also remains is this: the memory of a girl who once loved photography and had a laugh, too big for the room. The giggles of a little boy in red pajamas who just wanted a hug, a community that saw through the lies, a courtroom that listened, and a country that said no more. Tylee and JJ were never zombies. They were never possessed. They were never obstacles to a spiritual mission. They were children. They were light, and though that light was stolen far too soon, the echo of their love continues to burn, in classrooms, in courtrooms, in the silent vows of every parent holding their kids a little tighter at night.